So, what we have done in class, as hopefully you will have done by following my directions online, is please open the shades. We have heard a little bit of Holst from the Planets and Stravinsky from the Rites of Spring, and talked about the shift from romantic towards neoclassical music and the differences in those aesthetics. And then I flashed back a little bit to economic theory because there was something I forgot before we finished with socialism, and that is where we go from there. And where we go is to two economic theories, basically, about how to handle the respiration of the market. The market expands like a giant inhalation as people add staff, they add workers to their factories, they produce more and more because there's a bigger demand than there is a supply. Then at some point, the supply exceeds demand and the economy exhales. That's recession, that's depression. And that can be a problem because people get laid off, or fired, factories close, and there's a lot of misery. So, given that we are not going to shift to complete capitalism, within the free world there is a tension between liberals and progressives on the one hand and conservatives and libertarians on the other. Liberals and progressives tend to follow the economic theories of Lord John Maynard Keynes, a British economist who believes that what you need to do is have the government provide spending, employing people to do things. It doesn't really matter what, as long as checks go to people, because those people can then pay for their needs, and that paying for their needs will stimulate demand and will dig us out of the ditch. All of college economic theory, the econometrics classes that you may take, is based on Keynesian models. Because the Keynesian approach is to look at economy like an architect looks at building. And the architect works according to a theoretical master plan, a bunch of blueprints that's drawn up. The economist is trying to find the blueprints inherent in the natural economy. And what they come up with are mathematical models that seem to, in many cases, model what the economy does. And by tweaking the models, by having government spending here and there, stimulating spending, stimulating other things, the government can act as a regulator to prevent the booms from getting too overheated and to prevent the busts from being too painful for the unemployed. F.A. Hayek, an Austrian economist, Friedrich August von Hayek, he argues that no, the economy is not modelable. There are things that we use every day that we don't understand. Hayek doesn't say this, but I will. We rely on a power grid, an electrical grid, provided by nuclear power plants, coal power plants, hydroelectric power plants, and a little bit of solar and wind. And we don't understand the power grid. We just use it. I will say this again. On a theoretical level, we do not understand the power grid. The power grid is not about providing a lot of electricity, storing it, and using it when we need it. The power grid is primarily about moment by moment having enough electricity. Moment by moment, not overproducing, not underproducing. So this involves anticipating the needs of people based on past performance, based on weather, based on other things like that. We tweak and model and hope that we get there. And when it doesn't happen, we have blackouts or brownouts. The human brain, we use it all the time. We're still trying to understand basically how it works. How do we get a mind out of a brain? And there are theories, but they're theories. The stock market and the broader economy is something that we use all the time. Hayek says we do not understand it beyond a certain point. And to pretend that we do is a conceit, it's a pretense. And it's destructive because we play God when we really don't understand what we're doing. It's like giving a child a bunch of metal gear, solid metal gear, and they end up producing a gun. They don't know what they're doing. They're just putting the thing together. They're being clever. And a trigger just begs to be squeezed. So this debate going back and forth is played out in the Econo-Raps that I just played. There is no answer. At least as a Hayek disciple myself, I don't believe there is an answer, but I think even Keynes would agree. In a free market, you can't have too much regulation or you destroy the free market. And if you eliminate regulation entirely, which is not exactly what Hayek is advocating, he's advocating a reduction of it, then you end up with people producing bread made out of sawdust and tainted meat and putting it on the market, like the Chinese Communist Party and their factories do. So, before we go on, are there any thoughts, questions, comments, or reactions to what we've just experienced? Yes?
I was just wondering if you know, like, did they write books? Because I feel like
yes, they both wrote lots of books. That's how
they were any
real
famous ones.
Yeah, no. When you see that scene at the beginning of the second video where they're sort of trash talking one another, The Return of the Master, that's a book by Keynes. The Road to Serfdom, which is a book that I have in here, is by F.A. Hayek. He argues that government spending will inevitably produce a return to feudalism, where the few technocrats become the new aristocracy and everyone else becomes like a serf, dependent upon that.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, they argued through books. I don't believe they ever met in an actual debate.
Yeah.
That's the.
I just thought that it was interesting enough if I could read one of them eventually.
Well, again, right behind you somewhere is a book by Hayek, and no doubt you won't have any trouble finding a book by John Maynard Keynes. Now, why would the establishment be Keynesian? The establishment, by the way, includes moderate and liberal Republicans. Well, how many careers can you base on a notion that the economy is organic and what you need to do is get out of the way and let it do what it's going to do without trying to interfere? Not that many. On the other hand, how many careers are made if you make an argument that the economy is modelable and that you just have to be clever enough to figure out that model, and then you can tweak it and master it and manipulate it to do what you want? Entire economics departments in universities and colleges are based on that principle. The economics profession, many people in corporate America and in government base their careers on the Keynesian-style notions of modeling the economy and of playing games and manipulating it. So and those journalists who report on all of this are educated in universities. They go to economics classes and they think they understand economics, and they understand theories of economics. That's different from understanding what's actually going on. This is something that as intellectual people you should appreciate. Is what we are teaching in school real? Well, yes, of course it is. There are approaches to mathematics, science, history, literature, art, music, athletics that are worth knowing. If we don't teach them to you, you don't become acculturated into our society and you don't therefore function smoothly within it. So what we do is, in its own way, quite important. But there is a point where you, if you're thinking about things objectively, have to wonder, is what they are teaching you about how to turn the world into a model, and then you figure out how the model works, and you infer that the world works like the model does, and you tweak the model, and you infer also that by tweaking the world that way, you'll get the same results. At what point does that become mirage? And different people answer that question differently. But all of you are intelligent enough and hardworking enough to master college, to master the theoretical knowledge that's taught in college. And that will give you opportunities for careers and all the rest. But I suggest that, like any human-derived structure, the theories that we learn are limited and provisional, and a degree of humility would be helpful as you go about your careers. Some sense that there are more things under heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamed of in your philosophies. Otherwise, you fall into a different kind of intellectual trap. The idea that you understand what no one can understand. And in your belief that you understand, you act in a way that is, in fact, inviting nemesis, because it's hubris. Thoughts, or do we move on? Yes, I'm telling some of the smartest students in Ohio that there's a limit to what intelligence can get you in life. There's a place for wisdom, common sense, and humility. You can think about it, or not. It's up to you. The Edwardian era starts in England in 1901. It ends when King Edward VII dies, I think in 1911 or 1912. But basically, it's the period of the early 20th century before World War I. And this period is dominated by Germany. And I think that's where we're going to leave things today. I look at the time, I see where we are. So I guess we'll start off with the Edwardian era in the lecture tomorrow. Now, I warn you, there are 1 or 2 days of lecture in these notes. And then there's your unit exam. So I would expect your unit exam to be probably next Tuesday. And the unit exam is going to be on everything that we have talked about since the last one, which is Romanticism, nationalism, imperialism, and the Belle Epoque and the Edwardian era and lead up to World War I. And also, since I finally included them, Keynes and Hayek. Thank you. You can talk among yourselves. Oh, yes.
I was wondering if you could sign this for the NHS application.
What you're really asking, and you too, I think,
Yes.
is do I think that you are worthy of joining the NHS?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not just me signing something.
Yeah.
It's me approving you, which I'd be happy to. So.